Force a turnover at halfway. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
two on the clock.
Alrighty guys, and welcome back to the Basketball Fix podcast, NBL Supercoach sessions, and always I am joined by Jeremy Darke, not Jeremy Jack, Jeremy Darke. How you going, mate? And welcome back, obviously, to the show. How did you go last week?
Mate, great week. I work well under pressure, apparently. It's never been heard before, but it's definitely worked last week when I was in absolute shambles after we did our live show last week with the news that Magnay was out. But I shuffled some things around, made some good trades, and had a cracking week, finishing with a top 3% score and beating your ass, which is the most important thing for me right now.
Definitely, mate. So what did you score, and what was your ranking, and how much did you move up?
So I scored 406 points. So I moved up 508 spots and am now ranked 1,475th. So getting back into business, if you think, okay, jumped up 500 spots, like jumped up 25% or closed the 25% gap on first place, which is you got to be pleased about, considering it was an absolute shambles probably about an hour before the first tip-off on Thursday night. So, but yeah, like I said, man, just happy that I beat you by the skin of my teeth, huh?
Definitely. 2-point win for yourself this week, mate. So congratulations to that. I just don't understand. The team is not performing the way it should be. There's so many underperforming players. I'm losing my cash. I'm losing everything. But yes, like you mentioned, a 404 point finish there for me. Moved up 653 places and currently have a rank of 2,364. It's been a weird round, this round for sure. With obviously the changes in scoring. I don't think there was obviously that many high scoring sort of games this week. I'm just getting up what the top score of the round was. But in terms of obviously a whole round, it just seemed really, really weird. The top score was 476. So that's a monster score realistically for this week because obviously we didn't have those really, really high scores that those people would have been captaining. Like if you look back a couple of weeks ago with obviously the Parker Jackson Cartwright captains and Xavier Cooks and all those top end guys, there was no one that really shone through. But let's get into obviously who were some of the good and bad performers for us this week now, mate. We're going to do this very, very shortly. I want to hear your number one good performer and your number one poor performer from last round.
Mate, I'll be pleased to say the top performer for me this week was your boy, Mr. Nathan Sobey. Took a risk, obviously, bringing him in, especially with the news that Derek Walton Jr. was coming back. There was a lot of unease about that and how it was going to affect the team as a whole and also Sobey's performance. But he actually, he went off in that second game. I believe he scored like 45 in the second game, which is one of his biggest scores all year, I think, in a single game, and scored 67 overall. But the most pleasing thing with that was he had a break even of, I want to say like 34 coming into the round. So he pretty much doubled that and earned me 37K on top of that. So I got the best of both worlds there. One of it, I think he was a top 3, top 4 performer and earned me 37K at the same time. But you'll be happy to know that he's already walking the plank this week. So we'll get into that a little bit further on in the show.
Definitely. I'll get into my good performer quickly before we jump into obviously our negatives of the week. But my good performer was Jack White. Now, I think at the end of the day, Jack White had an incredible round with 62 points and obviously with the injury, which we will touch on a little bit later because that is going to impact both of our trade choices and sort of talks as well. I originally wasn't going to trade out Jack White because he's just been so darn good and they've got a pretty good run coming up. But his 62 points was, I guess, a really, really nice boost in a sense. And it could have been such a bigger sort of point this week as well because of the injury that really, rocked him and Melbourne United in that particular game as well, that point of the game. But he was my good performer for the round. I think he's obviously been incredible this season. He's been a great hold for myself, but it's going to be an unfortunate time with him obviously leaving my team. Now, I'm going to jump into my bad performer of the week, and there wasn't really a number of bad performers, to be honest with you. They were just always subpar is probably the best way to describe them. But Matt Hurt will be my bad performer of the week. 44 points on a double game week. He's just been so good over the last sort of 5 or 6 rounds. And for whatever reason, since I brought him into my team, he's just been absolute dog water. And I think it's more based around the fact that their team has been a lot more of a scoring team. And he hasn't really been going in the post as much, getting those rebounds and looking for that boost in the double-double department. So it's going to be interesting. He's going to be a very interesting watch over the next couple of weeks and what he does, because at the end of the day, if the shot isn't falling, which it sort of wasn't on the weekend, it was a bit of a weird week for Matt Hurt, then he's a pretty big liability in terms of Supercoach scoring. But for your poor performer, Jez, what did you currently have, mate?
Man, I had Tyler Robinson and he got -1. So, like, yeah, in my first round of trades, I had Tyler Robinson out and also Angus Glover out, who was one of my best performers. But Tyler Robinson at -1 just sort of hurts. You sort of got him in to earn a little bit of cash through that whole Jalen Adams drama, and it's just hasn't been a priority to get him out. So he's basically just gone ±0, has been an absolute dead space on my team. I think I might have even traded him out for Antonio, which was doing the same thing at the start of the season.
Yeah.
So I've been running with a what is it, a 5-man bench, no, 4-man bench basically, because I've just had a black hole there in that second guard position since the start of the season.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one. So he went down 17.5K last week, and he has a break even this week of 23. So let's hope for whatever reason Jalen Adams doesn't play again, and we might see a bit of a miracle. You're 100% spot on there, mate. Now, as always, we're going to jump into our schedulizer thoughts and obviously touch on who's got the double game weeks, who's got the single game weeks, who we're liking, who's got some good runs coming up, all that good stuff. Now, the double game weeks this week is very, very interesting. So, obviously, Perth are on their massive run of double game weeks and have been a very, very juicy trading target over the last couple of weeks. But the one surprising factor and exciting factor, I think personally, is the fact that the Brisbane Bullets now will have their first double game week of the year. Now, this is going to open up for a lot of players to come in purely based around the fact that with these two teams only having doubles, a lot of people are going to be trying to target at least one or two Brisbane Bullets players this week. And they've got a pretty good run coming up as well over the next month and a half. But it's going to be very interesting because we're going to touch on that a little bit later in our trade thoughts. But obviously guys like Tyro Harrison, Josh Bannon, Keandre Cooks, James Bateman, they're all guys that are now going to be really flirting into our team who may haven't been in the past. Obviously guys like Casey Prather and Rocco Zakarski have been some names that we've all sort of flirted with in our team over the season. But I'm excited by this because we're really struggling with, I think, some centre depth in the NBL Supercoach world. And for Tyrell Harrison to really come into our team, I think he's going to make an immediate impact. But in terms of the single game weeks this week, mate, what have we got and what are you kind of liking for not only this week but in future rounds as well?
Yeah, well, obviously it's the other 8 teams in the NBL that do have the single game week, but it's more about sort of looking at, right, who are you trading out now and who's got some good runs coming up. I think if you've got Melbourne United players, obviously not Jack White with the injury, but if you've got Melbourne United players, you're obviously probably going to hold them because they just go on a little run now of 2 single game weeks, but then they have doubles in round 11 and 12. So you can hold those. And then New Zealand also, I think we've all were smart enough to hold on to your key New Zealand players, why they went on a little short single game week run of 2 weeks. But after they have one more in round 9, and then they go on another 4 double game week runs. So, yeah, I think you're holding on to New Zealand players. Obviously, everyone's going to be happy that Parker Jackson Cartwright goes back on his double, so you can almost stop thinking about who you are going to captain over that whole month of NBL. But yeah, so it is very interesting. I think we touched on it a little bit in our live show last week, where this is sort of crunch time now. I think you're going to see like what happened. We both got 400 plus scores last week and moved up 500 spots. So I think if you can come into that top 5%, 10% of scorers for each round over this period, I think you're going to see some pretty major jumps up the ranking, the total rankings, because yeah, this is really sort of separating, all right, how much cash have you got? How many big time players can you have in your team with so many different weeks of different teams having double game weeks? So it separates the men from the boys, is the quote of
It
the
definitely
day,
does.
maybe.
It's going to be an interesting round because I just think there's so many talented players in the NBL. You know, you're touching on guys like Parker Jackson Cartwright, who majority of good Supercoach owners would have kept him in their singles, and obviously they're going to have them again this week as well. And obviously guys like Montrezl Harrell have been kept by a lot of people, and they're guys who
Yeah.
you can definitely target on a single game week when there's only two teams playing the doubles, because it's not like we've got a ton of Perth Wildcats players scoring huge points and Brisbane Bullets players. So it's going to be interesting to see some different teams, because I reckon we might see some teams with only 2 or 3 Wildcats and Brisbane Bullets players.
Yeah.
And there's also a chance that we see some teams with 5 or 6 players as well. So it's going to be interesting, because there's going to be people this week definitely going for that, obviously, top of the round leaderboard and the money that comes with that as well. And there's going to be people who may go for that a little bit and ruin their season towards the back end as well. But it's all going to be a very, very interesting watch. Now, we are live currently on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at the moment. If you've got any questions that you'd like answered by myself and Jeremy, make sure you do leave them down in the comment section, where we will get down to them a little bit later on in the show. Now, let's get into some of our early trade talks, mate, because this week is going to be, in a sense, maybe a little bit make or break. And I'm going to kick it off straight away with you, mate, because I'm interested to see what sort of trade thoughts you're going to tell us right now, and maybe do a little bit later in the week and change it up? Or are you sort of currently set on what you're doing this week in NBL Supercoach?
I can give you my options at least. I'm absolutely not set. It is Monday today, and you just sort of never know how you feel heading into the weekend. But this is how it does look at the moment. Obviously, with White, we don't have a time frame of his injury, as far as I know. Nothing that I could find out there on the internet, and don't have any inside info. It's usually going to unveil itself. But yeah, obviously, but with him being out, I think you have to go for one of the bigs from Brisbane. So trading out Jack White to, currently I have Harrison in my team, but you could easily bring in Bannon. Harrison actually had a little bit of a quiet week, but I think his ceiling is pretty high, and they do have that good matchup, I think, this week against the Jack Jumpers, I believe. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, Jack Jumpers and Perth. Yep.
Yeah, so I think both of those you can see Harrison really sort of getting in there and getting some really big scores, but the same with Bannon. So it just depends if Harrison is an absolute mongrel and hammers the boards. Well, I think you see Bannon gets in there and scores. He's a little bit more of the all-round player, so scoring points and also rebounds. But yeah, Harrison can do it both. So currently I have Harrison, but purely just, I don't know, I think I just got a bit excited about his big score last week, or not last round, the round before, and think he was a little bit quiet last week, so he should be due to come up. And then I've actually given Sobey the boot, even though he scored the most points for me last week. I think it's more based around his break even. It was either Sobey, or I could have still had the cash to trade out Angus Glover. But now I think he has a break even of -12. So you've got to run with the cash from Glover. He went from having a break even of 18 and like averaging like 5 points over the last few weeks to now having a break even of -12 or whatever. So I think you got to keep him in there and just hope he stays hot or has a hot game this week. Because Sobey's break even was 24. So it's like, okay, there should definitely be more money to be made there. And it gives me a heap of cash to spend next week on who knows what. Let's not even go close to that. But they're my early. But Sobey's out and bringing in Keandre Cook. I had him in my team before I had to make all those changes last week, and he went off. I think he scored 40 plus last week. I think he's the best all-round guard for Brisbane, being a little bit more consistent than what Bateman is, but I can understand if people would bring in Bateman. I think he's a little bit cheaper and can also score. So I think if you're bringing in one of those guards in that, up the top there, then it's either Keandre Cook or Bateman but I feel more comfortable at the moment. Cook has had, I think he got 34 the week before, and then he scored 41 last week. So it looks like Brisbane are starting to revolve their offense a little bit around Cook more so. So I like that trade. What are you looking at this week so far?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one with the Brisbane Bullets players because you're touching on obviously, Bateman and Cook there, and Bateman's been a player who's been coming off the bench, so I don't like that for starters at all because you just don't know the sort of minutes and the sort of spread that he will get if he's even going to get on the court for a large amount of minutes. So Cook is the 100% better option if you're going for either of those two guys, and coming off a 41 and 35, I believe it was. They're incredible scores and very, very doable. So if you can get 35s out of him for both those games, you're looking at a 70-point mark, which is what you'll probably expect from a guy like Keandre Cooks, for example. So something like that I think would be really, really nice. But for myself, mate, I am bringing in my boy. Now, a lot of guys will know I'm a massive fan of one guy. Yes, surprise, surprise. And I might be letting my love for this man really get in my way for this guy. But I just think he's due now, I think. Now, guys like this is, I think, personally, the Brisbane Bullets need to make their focal point Josh Bannon. That's the reason why I'm bringing him in. He's had a pretty good start of the season, but he's really starting to find his form now after establishing himself a little bit more, coming back from injury. He had 28 points last week. He's currently averaging 25.8 points this week. And he's just been really, really good. So I'm going Jack White down to Josh Bannon. And then my other trade is going to be Milton Doyle to Tyrell Harrison. So nice enough, I think, in a sense, bringing obviously Tyrell Harrison into my team because those two guys are both double threats at the end of the day, and we all know what double sort of points, get the extra point boost there. The rebounding statistics are nice. So obviously Harrison having 20 rebounds only 3 weeks ago against the Cairns Taipans, I believe it was. So we know what he's capable of, and like you mentioned, the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers with injuries galore, obviously around with Will Magnay and Fabian Krislovic hasn't really created much interior defense down there. I think it's going to really open the floor up for Tyrell Harrison and Josh Bannon. And we might see some big rebound numbers there as well. But it's sort of a disappointing one because obviously with the Jack White injury, I would have loved to have gotten Matt Hurt out of my team with his really high break even. I think it's at 47 on a single game week. So that's one that I'm really disappointed that I can't get out of my team, to be honest with you. And even Fabian Krislovic as well. Hopefully Will Magnay doesn't play. I was hoping for a little bit more of a score out of him last week in his two games. He only gave me 25 and it was really, really disappointing, to be honest with you. He could have had a double-double against the New Zealand Breakers, but just couldn't put the ball in the hole. So a couple of guys I'm obviously not too happy with, but at the end of the day, it does come down to how these guys perform on the day. But let's get our teams up on the screen here, mate. I'm going to kick it off with your team first. And we're going to
Josh, before we jump into there, I've got maybe a question for you and your expertise. Rocco Zikarsky obviously hasn't been getting as much time as anybody would have thought. But do you think now that Brisbane are going to start moving into this patch of double game weeks, are we going to see a little bit more time given to Rocco Zikarsky? And could he then possibly be a trade option to bring in and earn a little bit of cash?
I definitely think he's going to become a trade option for sure. I'm just pulling up his minutes from their most recent game because I'm pretty sure he had a decent game for them. But you're bang on the money there, mate. I think a guy like him with obviously the double game weeks and the extra load that does bring into obviously the game, Zikarsky's going to see a rise in his game time. We saw it slightly against the Melbourne United. Now he played 12 minutes for 5 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals and 1 block. But he's got to really be more aggressive, I think, personally, when he's on the court. He just seems to be a guy who's happy sitting in the paint and just trying to defend instead of trying to go down the other end and score. And that's where it becomes a bit weird for me because Brisbane's game style seems to be a very post-centric game with obviously Tyrell Harrison and Josh Bannon being their best players. So I think Rocco Zikarsky is going to be a trade-in option because of how cheap he is. But I would like to see one more week and just see what the rotations do look like when they play a double game week. And then obviously you're going to bring him in relatively cheap because he's currently 93K. So that's a great question, I think, there, though, mate, because that flags it for everyone listening right now because he is a good player for starters, scored 16 points last week, and he's going to be a really, really good player in the future. But I think his upside in Supercoach points is really, really high. It's going to be interesting, though, to see if Justin Schuller gives him those minutes there for sure, mate. Definitely. Alrighty, let's bring up your team here first, mate. Let's analyse your team, go through your projections, go through what sort of cash you've got left over. You've got a nice, juicy amount of cash, mate, to work with, obviously, next week.
Yeah, I like the Supercoach gods. I think we talk about them. You should be talking about them and praising them and leaving. I don't know. What do? You give them some sort of Supercoach sacrifice, killing some sort of animal or duck or something
Maybe
small
Tyler
and
Robertson this
fluffy
week
or
for you,
something.
mate.
Yeah, exactly. Put him up on the sacrifice to the Supercoach gods to keep them shining, because I've been sort of a little bit lucky chasing points and have still managed to build up my kitty and have a pretty healthy total price of my team. And then, now I'm playing four double game week players as in my starting lineup and still have 157k in the bank. So I'm pretty happy with how my team actually looks this week, which will probably mean that it's going to go like absolute dog shit, because it seems to be the trend. The more confident you are in a week, I think the worse you go. It sort of seems that way. But yeah, the big call, I think
Been
the
my whole
toughest.
season.
Yeah, I think the toughest call is. You brought it up earlier in the start of the show, and that's sort of like what to do with some of these Perth players that haven't really been as consistent as you would have liked on the double game weeks. Like you can see sort of straight off there. I guess for those that are listening, I should probably go through my team first. I've got Keandre Cook and Parker Jackson Cartwright as my starting guards, Tyrell Harrison as my starting centre, and then I've got Pinder and Henschel as my starting forwards. Then I have on the bench Montrezl Harrell and Sam Menenga. I have Almanza as my bench centre, and then I have Glover and still carrying Tyler Robinson there as a backup guard. Now, as I was saying, the big call is like, do you play Harrell instead of Henschel? You can see on the visual on YouTube and Instagram Live that Henschel scored 43 on a double game week and Montrezl Harrell scored 45 on a single game week. So obviously the ceiling is higher with Henschel because he could miraculously have two 30-point games and string together two really strong performances, but that hasn't done. And then you're talking straight up about his partner in crime. That's Mr. Inconsistent himself when it comes to Supercoach scores, and that is Keanu Pinder. Also had sort of one big game last week and then one pretty poor game. So it's like, do you start Harrell maybe instead of Henschel or not? But then, as you can see, even Almanza is on a double game week, but I have him on my bench. But he's obviously in the centre position behind Tyrell Harrison. So that's sort of the challenges that I do have this week. And also captain choice is going to be tough. Do you play Cook or do you play Harrison, Pinder? I think if you have, we'll get into it obviously in Darke's doubles at the end. But that could very, very easily change because I could almost not even have Cook in my team by game time. So we'll see. What are your thoughts on my team, mate?
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've got a quick question here. So there's a way you can get 5 players on the double in your starting lineup, and that would obviously mean sacrificing Parker to the bench. So is there a world where you would bring in Alan Munster on a double over Parker Jackson Cartwright? Because the rotations were very interesting with Perth, where he started that game against Melbourne United and nearly put up a double-double there as well. So is that the risk you're willing to take is the question? Because obviously there's a little bit of upside, but not much.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Like you look at his average, it's 13.7. You look at the average of Parker Jackson Cartwright and it is 41. Also, New Zealand played Cairns this week, so we could see a very, very massive score from Parker Jackson Cartwright, potentially.
We may as well double and captain him, I reckon, this week, to be honest with you, if that's the case. But yes, besides that, though, mate, I think it's a very solid team because, like you mentioned, you've obviously got Tyler Robinson. It's a little bit of a downer, but Glover had an incredible game. And if that continues over the next sort of round or two with D-Walt coming back from that injury, that's going to be very interesting. And obviously Sam Menenga, okay, made a bit of cash, but he's obviously got his double game week run coming up as well. So I like the overall structure of your team, and it's going to be interesting to see who you captain if this team does stay the same, because it's a tough one. I think this is the hardest week with captains we've seen in a long time because a lot of these guys have shown glimpses of really, really big games, but also really, really poor games as well. But 374 projected, 157k in the bank, mate. I don't think you can be too disappointed with that. Now we're going to bring up my team on the screen here and analyze it closely. So at my guard positions, I've got Parker Jackson-Cartwright and Benny Henschel. At my centre, I've got Tyrell Harrison. Forwards, I've got Christian Doolittle and Josh Bannon. On the bench, as my backup forwards, I've got Matt Hurt and Fabian Krislovic. At my backup centre, I have got Sam Menenga. And my backup guards is Matthew Dellavedova and Jackson McCoy. So bit of an interesting mix here. Similar to you, mate, I've got 4 guys starting on the double this week with Parker Jackson-Cartwright as the 5th player starting. And not really much besides that. Obviously, Matthew Dellavedova had an okay week last week. That game against the Perth Wildcats, he had 12 assists and only 2 points. So if we can see the points start to rise up and meet the assist numbers, that would be a nice little cash injection. And Jackson McCoy's a guy who was probably stiff to not make it into my good performance of the week after his 31 points last week and another 40k cash increase as well. So that's been a nice little move for me. 40 looks like he's really starting to trust him again after his incidences off the court. But yeah, he's obviously probably got another week or 2 maximum in my team. But projections this week, 398 and a salary cap remaining of 68,400. What are your thoughts, mate?
Well, first of all, I'm happy you're projecting higher than me because usually when you project higher than me, it means that I end up coming up and beat you. So that's the
smoking me.
yeah. But yeah, I think the toughest thing now for you, I guess, is what you do with maybe some of these players that aren't coming on to double game week runs over the next few weeks. I think obviously with like Delhi's on a double run, but you sort of got to get out Krislovic, you got to get out Hurt. McCoy's earning your cash. So I think that's obviously the challenge that you're facing, but obviously with another projected score of 400, and if you can just get a little bit of luck on your side, I think this is, I think that number, the 400 number, if anybody can score over 400 points this week, I think you're gonna jump up probably another good 300 to 500 places because I think there's going to be a lot of people struggling this week, and I think a lot of it's going to have to do with likely how well benches perform, I believe. So I think with Matt Hurt on your bench, it's a really, really good, you've got a lot of potential to score some really good points. And same even with McCoy now that he's getting more. So I think your bench depth is good. And that could be what helps you move up a whole lot this week.
Definitely. I think it would have been a lot nicer seeing Jack White still on the bench over Matt Hurt, and just in terms of obviously what's coming up. And the thing with Matt Hurt staying in my team is the fact that if Jack White, let's just say, comes back before they run a doubles again, that's a nice little switch there from Matt Hurt to Jack White. And then there'll be a correction trade with Fabian Krislovic, probably down to one of the cheaper sort of guys coming through. It could be a Rocco Zakarski at that point. So that's what I'm sort of looking at right now, as a few correction trades. So yeah, you're 100% bang on. We've obviously no boost, so I've got to trade really, really smartly. And I think what I liked last season...
You have 0 boosts left.
Up. 0 boosts left, yep. So I'm fully cooked out. So this is where I liked last year, and this is where I actually rose up the ranking. About this time last year, I was sitting at about 800. And then 4 rounds later, I was sitting in the top 50 with also 0 boosts left as well. So I think when I have 0 boosts, I tend to plan a little bit further ahead. But this season has been as unpredictable as they do come, for sure, mate. But let's get into my favourite segment of the week. I love hearing what you've obviously planned away in the backgrounds, mate, with your darts doubles. So let's get into it, because this is probably the toughest round, I think, choosing a dominant and consistent captain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can start off. Last week I took some guys from each of the 4 teams, sort of done a little bit here looking at certain options for the 2 teams that are on double game weeks. And I think you don't look any further than Tyrell Harrison for Brisbane as the most, he's probably going to be the most popular pick, I would presume, by the end of by the first tip-off on Friday. It is this week, actually. He's averaging... he scored 30 against Tasmania last time they played, so that's definitely a positive. And then there's just the news of if Magne is going to start or not. So there could be that you could see that increase a lot more if Magne's not out there, because you're just going to see Harrison be an absolute animal there, picking up all the boards. So he should have a very, very dominant night in the paint if Magne is not there. And then, yeah, they haven't played Perth yet. So, but I think, yeah, those Perth games, that's sort of the big battle, because you've got your 2 double game week teams, and maybe whoever wins that battle between, we could say, move into Doolittle. I think a lot of people are going to have Doolittle as their captain as well. And I think that whoever wins that battle in Perth, or Perth versus Brisbane, on the rebounds, is going to be the one that puts up the massive score. So it could very, very well be Doolittle that does that. He's averaging 30.8 points. He scored, a 23 and a 16 against Southeast Melbourne in the 2 games they've played against Southeast Melbourne this year. So that's a little bit of a concern, I think. But otherwise, I think Doolittle's definitely the number one choice there, because it's really, really hard. Like we said, with these Perth players, you haven't really got anyone that's been consistent besides Doolittle. So I think you can absolutely take a risk on Pinder. You could take a risk on Henschel, but that's a very, very dangerous game, because you could end up eating it very, very hard. So captains, you want to sort of make sure that you're hitting 60 points, and I think you get that out of Harrison and Doolittle. I also want to throw in Keandre Cook, purely based on his last 2 performances. Like we said, yeah, a 34 and a 41, or a 35 and a 41 over the last 2 weeks. So if you put those 2 together, obviously some quick math here, and you'll get 76 points from your captain if he could repeat those 2 performances. Mathematician here. That's how you win Supercoach. But yeah, and then the wild card, like you said, PJC. You never know. Coming up against Cairns, could pop a 60, could pop a 70. Could be a lot of assists, a lot of points. So if you want to do something crazy, then I wouldn't look down on it if someone had Parker Jackson Cartwright as their captain and played that card.
Stranger things have happened, haven't they, mate? We saw Harold score a 67 only about a month ago now, so they are very well and truly attainable. But yeah, I like the choices. I just think it's such a wide open week this week, and I want to hear what the viewers have to say. If you've got your thoughts quickly on the captains before we jump into some of the questions that we have on there, make sure you go and comment them below, and we'll touch on them very, very shortly. And I think it's down to 2 players, to be honest with you. I think it's Tyrell Harrison and Christian Doolittle for myself. I think the other guys have had a few questions around them. I think you could throw Josh Bannon in there potentially as well with his double-double threat. I've got one flag with Christian Doolittle, and it's why I'm probably going to back and have backed currently your number one option in Tyrell Harrison. And that's the fact that in that game against Melbourne United, they really made Christian Doolittle a point forward, and everything ran through him. And we didn't see the assist numbers because he was very keen to be on the outside and really starting to obviously attack the paint and I guess facilitate more than rebounding. So in terms of the double-doubles, they look like they've gone away at the moment, which is a massive boost for his points. That's what's getting him from those 30 to 35 points to obviously those 40 to 45 point scores. So it's a bit of a question mark, but obviously he is facilitating, which is also a plus side as well. He had 4 late turnovers in that game. He was up to about 32 points and then lost a lot of that sort of generation of points late as obviously Melbourne really started to put the clamps on Christian Doolittle. But I don't know if you'll see the same pressure against the Brisbane Bullets in that second game of the round for them, which is going to be very interesting. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do. But I think you've nailed them 100%, mate. I'm looking forward to seeing what you choose. I'm going to definitely lock in Tyrell Harrison. I think personally, I just think the upside that he presents with a double-double threat, I think he will be the number one captain this week. But let's get into, obviously, some of these questions from the fans. Now, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what some of these guys have said. Now, at Little Swifty05, thoughts on Harrell? Go away, Jez. You've got him. So what are some of your thoughts on Montrezl Harrell?
Yeah, I think if there's a way you can get Harrell into your team if you don't have 5 confident starters that are on a double game week, I think there's 2 players that you would definitely have in your team as single game week players, and one is Parker Jackson Cartwright and the other is Montrezl Harrell. So I think definitely worth having him in your team as a starter this week if you are struggling in any of those positions, or you haven't made trades, so you've got like 4 or 5 starters in there. So yeah, definitely an option. Get him in there if you need him in there, because he can score 50 plus on a single game week. Absolutely.
Definitely. I'm 100% on the same bandwagon as you, mate. I think you can start him over a guy like Benny Henschel, for example, if that's the guy you've probably got in that position, or even a guy like Keanu Pinder, to be honest with you. I think obviously he's got a lot more upside than some of these other guys as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do. Now, Skittles has asked us, let's just walk out of NBL and go to BBL. I am on board with this one, Skittles. It's been an absolute horrible season, mate. I've had a stinker, to say the least. I think my team should be performing a lot better than what it does, mate. But I am 100% on board. I'm looking forward to the BBL kicking off and the summer of cricket coming up very shortly as well. So I'm on board, mate. What about yourself, Jez? You on board with Skittles?
Pause, just wait and see how you pull through these next few weeks. This week, and then there's the international break, and then there's a couple of big weeks after that before it all jams into a whole heap of double game weeks for everybody. I think you're really going to see where you stand properly after these next few weeks. So if you think you are a savvy NBL Supercoach player, then definitely hold out just a few more rounds before you give up hope.
Definitely.
And give your money to the cashier of your head-to-head leagues.
Definitely. Lock that one in for sure. Now, next question. Logan Angrove, when to trade out Perth players? This is the question on everyone's mind. Now, I'm going to get the schedule up relatively quickly here, obviously. Now, I think they've still got 3 doubles to come after this round. I was having a look now. So
this
got
round
3 doubles,
and then another 2.
And they go on a 4 run of singles, then before coming back for a couple of doubles. Now, it generally comes down to who you've obviously got in the team. So right now I've got Benny Henschel, Christian Doolittle, and also, I think that's it actually. I've only got the 2 guys. So I think you've got the 3 on your team. That's right.
Yeah, I've got Almanza.
To pull my team up right now. So realistically, 2 guys to trade out when you've got Benny Henschel and Christian Doolittle. Obviously, Henschel's making you a nice amount of cash, and Doolittle's still putting up a good amount of points. I think you can nearly hold them right until the end, and you're probably obviously going to get rid of Doolittle over a guy like Benny Henschel or Itana Matza first, just because you can upgrade straight away to another high-scoring player. And Benny Henschel's probably a guy on your bench with obviously Bryce Cotton's injury and the uncertainty around that you can probably hold on to for a few more weeks now as well, with him scoring in the sort of mid to late 20s every single game there as well. So I'm a firm believer. I think maybe getting rid of a guy like Itan Almanza the week before they go on their last double, I should say. But guys like Keanu Pinder, Christian Doolittle, Benny Henschel, you've brought them in for a reason. And unless it's a really, really drastic improvement, I'd probably hold on them until you're completely done with their run of doubles. What about you, Jess?
I think it's... You hold them at round 9 this week, round 10 next week, but there's definitely potential to get them out in round 11, because you start seeing a few more teams back on double game weeks. That round, there's half the league, no more, 6 teams in round 11 will be on double game weeks, and it will be Perth's last week before that 4-week single game week run. So always depending on how your team actually looks. But I think, you can definitely do some of these sort of sideways double game week to double game week player trades in round 11 when Perth's on their final one, because as long as you've got, we go back to, you're going to need at least 8 double game week players if those single game week players aren't guys like Montrez Harrell but they're both on double game weeks in round 11. So you're going to need quite a lot of double game week players in round 11. So I think you keep them if you don't have at least 8 double game week players in your team, but you get rid of them, I think, if you've got that for sure. And it'll be exactly like you said, you look for Almanza and Henschel first, maybe Henschel or Pinder, but you'd be keeping Doolittle until they go on their single game weeks for sure.
Definitely. I think this next sort of run coming up over the next 3 to 4 rounds is almost the most challenging before we get into the round 18 to 20 run as well. So this is where we're going to start to see some people either separate or close the gap before we go on this massive run of every team nearly playing double game weeks every single round. So it's going to be really, really impressive. But that will wrap up today's episode on NBL Supercoach Sessions. Thank you for joining myself and Jez on the live streams, asking some of your questions. We hope we answered all of them really, really well for you guys, and make sure you do get involved. This will be a regular occurrence now every Monday at 4:40 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time and 7:40 Australian Eastern Standard Time. We will be jumping on here as well. So make sure you set your calendars, set your reminders, all that sort of stuff as well to come on here and answer all the questions nice and early. If you want to listen to this episode once again, make sure you go and check it out on our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts as well if you are listening to the live stream. But obviously coming up, we've got our weekly show Beyond the Buzzer, breaking down all the biggest news topics, previewing a few of the games, and touching on plenty of more content in the NBL world. We've got Higgins' Hot 3 Takes. We've got the NBL Next Star Show, which is obviously Ryan's Path to Pro, and plenty of stuff over at www.thebasketballfix.com, where we are writing plenty of articles there, game previews, game reviews, everything you can think of is happening over at the Basketball Fix as well. So if you want your alternative and new news source for the NBL, make sure you go check that out as well, because we're delivering not negative content, but really, really fan engaging and positive content around the NBL, which a lot of other people aren't doing in the NBL media landscape. But until next time, this has been NBL Supercoach Sessions with myself and Jeremy Darke, and you've got your Basketball Fix.
Which stars come to play? He's the biggest of them all. Step back, 4-3. Phoenix forced a turnover at halfway. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.